What if I told you that the love of your life is waiting for you on the other side of the world? How quickly would you book that flight? I know me personally, I booked that flight expeditiously, hence why I am filming this video from the Netherlands, a country that I had never previously visited and have now lived in for over 6 months. And I would advise you to do the exact same thing that I did if given the opportunity. If you find that you're struggling with dating where you live, I'm gonna assume you live in the US, then maybe you should try coming to Europe and testing the waters out here. But before you do that, you need to know what you are getting yourself into. When you date a European woman, and you're from the US, you're from Canada, you're from North America, wherever else, you need to understand that there is going to be a cultural gap. And this cultural gap is multifaceted. The first facet of this cultural gap is the language barrier. Yes, there is going to be a language barrier. If you're from the US like I am, you probably speak English as your primary language. Maybe you speak another language if you are passionate about learning languages, but if you're like me, you speak English and that's pretty much it. You need to understand that no matter where you come in Europe, unless you go to a place like London or anywhere in the UK, you need to understand that English will always be the woman's second language. Plain and simple. And because of that, every once in a while, depending on her level of proficiency in English, you might have difficulties communicating with her. And that's just going to be the reality of the relationship for as long as you don't speak her language, which is why I am making an effort to learn Dutch. Granted, I could make a greater effort, but I'm making an effort nonetheless, day after day after day. And I've come a long way, I would say. I'm not fluent, but I've come a long way in at least understanding Dutch. But if that's not something that you're up for, if that's not a challenge that you're willing to take on, then I would advise you to not book that flight, because it's pretty much a prerequisite for having a successful relationship. After all, communication is the key to any healthy and sustainable relationship. As a matter of fact, I'm gonna cut through the grass right here. Communication is the key to any successful and sustainable relationship. Bearing that in mind, you need to understand that there will be a language barrier, and the responsibility falls on your shoulders to learn her language because you are moving to her country. Now, aside from the language barrier, the next aspect of, almost got hit by a car. The next aspect of the cultural gap is the childhood experiences. Now, what do I mean by that? Your childhood experiences are going to be very different from hers, simply based on the fact that you grew up in two completely different places. Even two people from two different parts of the US have completely different childhoods. So imagine growing up in a different country. Different people growing up in different countries are going to have different tendencies. And the reason why is because more often than not, the conclusions that you draw about the world, and by extension, the way that you operate in the world, are determined by the experiences that you have from the time you're born until around age 7, 8, or 9, your formative years. So if somebody grew up in an environment like this in the Netherlands, and you grew up in the US, you're gonna have different viewpoints about the world. You're gonna have different tastes, different preferences. You're going to be into different things. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't be compatible with this person. I mean, my girlfriend and I clearly disproved that. But at the same time, there are going to be fundamental differences in how you see the world. Okay, you're getting with somebody who probably didn't even speak English until she was 10 years old, like my girlfriend. So you have to keep in mind that fundamentally she's going to see the world in a completely different way than you do, because again, she grew up in a completely different environment than you did. Now, in addition to the language barrier and the differences in childhood experiences, the next aspect of the cultural divide, the cultural gap, is she will prefer different things in a man than your average American woman. Now, listen, I am generalizing not just with this point, but throughout the whole entire video. But you need to understand that the whole reason why you're going to a different continent to date is because you're banking on the fact that women will prefer different things than the women where you live. Okay, that's the whole point of this Passport Bros movement, is that you're banking on the idea that you can still be yourself and simply change your environment, and by doing so, you will change your prospects in terms of dating. And I'm here to tell you that that's not a misguided assumption to make. Here in the Netherlands, I can't speak for the rest of Europe, but I imagine that most of Western Europe at least is like this. People, and particularly women, do not value the materialistic lifestyle that most Americans aspire to. Now, that's not to say that people here don't appreciate nice things. As a matter of fact, I would say that life in general and things here do tend to be of higher quality, from what I've observed at least. Houses tend to be higher quality, the infrastructure is higher quality, etc. But when it comes to the bling bling, the VVS, bust down watches, chains, all of that, leave that at home. When you book that flight after you watch this video, do not pack that in your suitcase. Don't pack it. That's not going to get you anywhere with girls here. If that's just who you are as a person, you just like to be flashy, then cool. But let's be realistic. Most men, probably yourself included, aren't getting that for personal satisfaction. You're getting it because deep down you think it'll make women like you more. And in the US, they will like you more. Here in the Netherlands, that is not true. Women have different preferences because, again, their childhood experiences, and by extension, the frame through which they view reality, are different. So, Dutch people in general tend to be much less materialistic because that's just the culture here. The culture here tends to lean more toward practicality rather than empty materialism. And if that's not something that you're into, then hey, maybe you need to stay in the US. But just know that if you move here or anywhere in this general vicinity, I'd imagine Germany's pretty similar, probably Norway, Sweden, all of these places, you need to understand that that's just the reality of the situation. Different women from different places will have different preferences. It's common sense, but I suspect that a lot of people don't really understand the gravity of that until the wheels hit the runway. That said, no matter where you go, there is one thing that is universally desired by women, no matter where you live. No matter where you move to, where you travel to, there's one thing that all women desire, and that is a man who takes care of himself. All women desire a man who takes care of himself because self-care is a direct reflection of self-value. When you take care of yourself, it indicates to people around you that you value yourself. And if you value yourself very highly, guess what's going to happen? Don't know where I'm walking. There's no sidewalk there. But if you value yourself very highly, people are going to value you highly as well. Generally speaking, people are going to accept your valuation of yourself, and women are no exception to this. So you need to take care of yourself in a way that is immediately apparent to anyone and everyone who comes into contact with you. Now, my personal recommendation, if you don't know where to start, is skincare. Why is that? The reason why is because when people look at you, the first thing that they see is your skin. And that brings me to Tiege Hanley, the sponsor of today's video. You've heard me talk about them before, and you're going to keep hearing me talk about them moving forward because I know the positive impact their products will have on your life. Seriously, I still think some of you don't believe me when I tell you just how much implementing a quality skincare routine will improve your confidence in all aspects of life. Tiege Hanley simplifies the process of taking care of your skin. They provide you with all of the products you need and none of the products that you don't need. I recommend you start with their level 1 skincare system, which comes with all of the basics: a daily face wash, an exfoliating scrub, an AM moisturizer with SPF 20, and a PM moisturizer. Oh, and to make it dead simple for guys like you and me, they provide this instruction card in every box that tells you when to use each product, how much of each product to use, and in what order to use each product. It definitely comes in clutch. Skincare wasn't always something I took seriously, but now that I have, I wish I would have started sooner. But you don't just have to take my word for it, because they have over 7,000 5-star reviews from customers all around the globe. In addition to amazing skin, members of Tiege Hanley get tons of benefits, including at least 20% off the retail price, access to exclusive monthly deals, the ability to pause or cancel your subscription at any time, and free US shipping. And because Tiege Hanley is sponsoring today's video, they're offering you an exclusive deal. Just click the first link in the description or the pinned comment to get 40% off your first box, 20% off for life, and a free silicone body scrubber. Click the link down below and get started today. Now, back to the video. Now, the next component of this cultural divide that you need to understand about the Netherlands, and I suspect the rest of Western Europe as well, maybe even Eastern Europe, I don't know too much about those countries, but definitely Western Europe, is that the women here are more independent. The women here are much more independent than American women. And when I say they're independent, I don't mean that in the overcompensating sort of way. I mean that in the I am genuinely your equal sort of way, which personally I agree with. I believe that women are my equal. As a matter of fact, my girlfriend is my partner. She's my equal. I don't see her as being some submissive sidekick to me. No, she is my equal. Granted, we have different strengths and weaknesses and we complement each other very well, but in terms of competence level, I see her as being my equal once again. Now, here's the thing. A lot of American men are not really used to this, and the reason why is because the culture, again, doesn't necessarily propagate the idea that women are equal. Of course, you have different movements. I won't name those movements, but you know what I'm talking about. But I'm not talking about a counterculture movement to compensate for a perceived lack of equality. I'm talking about genuinely embedded in the fabric of society type of equality. Now, why is this? Why is it that women here are more independent and are seen as equals of men? As a matter of fact, before I tell you why that is, let me share a quick little story to illustrate what I'm talking about. When I was in the US back in 2022, maybe about 6 months before I got with my current girlfriend, the likes of which I moved out here to be with, I went on a date with this girl that I met on Hinge, if I recall correctly. Now, this girl was from Memphis. So she was from the South. If you've never been to the US, Memphis is the South. And in the South, there are traditional Southern values, which in a progressive country like the Netherlands could very well be seen as misogynistic. But that's besides the point. I was on this date with this girl, and one of the first things that she pointed out to me when I went to hold her hand was that I was holding her hand incorrectly. And I remember thinking to myself, how is that even possible? How is it possible to hold someone's hand incorrectly? And what she told me really stuck with me. Now, mind you, just some context, this girl was an engineer, college degree, and as a matter of fact, she did most of the initiating the date. Okay, I would say she was the aggressor. I had never met a girl who was this straightforward as far as setting things up. Literally, the day after we matched, she wanted to go on a date. I said, all right, bet. let's link up. So you can imagine my surprise when she told me that my thumb was supposed to be on the outside of her thumb when we held hands, because I was the man and thus the protector. Okay, you can imagine that I was absolutely shook when she told me this. And she was so serious about it that I just went along with it. I said, okay, I mean, if that's how you feel, that's her childhood experience. That's what she was raised to believe. Again, those conclusions that you come to between the time you're born and around 7, 8, or 9 years old, those are the conclusions that you will use to inform the way that you operate in life. And she wanted me to fall in line with that conclusion, that my thumb should be on the outside of hers. Now to me, it didn't matter. Okay, we're holding hands. It's an act of affection. But to her, it did. So, in addition to that, you see I'm walking on this sidewalk right now. This is maybe a more common traditional idea, but one that I don't personally adhere to either. We were walking on the sidewalk and she told me, actually, she made us stop. She made us stop walking and she said, do you know about the sidewalk rule? I was like, the sidewalk rule? What are you talking about? And she was like, well, the man is supposed to walk on the outside of the sidewalk. So you see I'm walking toward the inside so I don't get hit by a car. She wanted me to walk on this side of the sidewalk so that she could walk on the inside. And every time we would walk down the street, the sidewalk, and turn around, I would have to go to the other side. Okay, now, again, I'm not holding this against her. I hope she found somebody who meets those values, but I think it became pretty apparent to both of us that we saw life in a different way. And mind you, I'm from the South too. I'm from Dallas. So I do things like hold the door open for women whenever I get the opportunity to. It's just common sense to me. But in the same way that that's common sense to me, the thumb on the outside and walking on the outside were common sense to her. Fundamental incompatibility. The point that I'm making is that in the US, you will come across women who think like that. I'm not saying it's bad, not saying it's wrong, but it is most certainly different. It is very, very different from what I've observed, what I've witnessed out here in the Netherlands. So let me cross the street before I get hit. So, out here in the Netherlands, like I said, I have a tendency to hold the door open for women and generally let them go in first. Why? Because that's how I was raised. Those are my childhood experiences. And to me, it's just good manners. I've noticed that when I do that out here, whenever I hold the door open for women, especially younger women, they look at me with genuine shock and confusion. Now, I don't know if this is just a generational thing, but I assume this has a lot to do with, again, women being seen as equals here. They're just seen as equals, therefore, why would you hold the door open for women and not for men? Again, it's because it's how I was raised. But at the same time, it always kind of surprises me when I see that they're surprised that I do that, because to me, it's just second nature. Why wouldn't I do that? What kind of man would I be to not do that? As a matter of fact, sometimes even with my girlfriend, who, like I said earlier, I see as my equal and my partner, sometimes with my girlfriend, I'll hold the door open for her, and then when she walks in, if there's another door right there, she'll try to hold the door open for me. And I'm like, no, you don't. I'll literally grab her, pick her up, and move her. I will relocate her out of the way so that I can hold the door open for her. Because to me, it's incomprehensible to allow a woman to hold the door open for me unless she is an employee at the building that I'm entering or exiting. Now, you might think that's misogynistic or whatever, but again, that's just the way that I see life. To me, it's just common sense and it's good manners. But I can understand how in a more progressive society like the Netherlands, that's not really the status quo. And to that point, you've heard me drop the word progressive quite a few times in the last few minutes, and that is for good reason. It's this progressive nature of the Netherlands and of Western European countries in general that create this dynamic of equality. The idea that women are the equal of men, which, like I said, I personally agree with, is embedded within the fabric of society because the society is progressive. Okay, the Netherlands was, to my knowledge, one of the first countries to legalize same-sex marriage, to legalize marijuana, recreational marijuana use. It's a very progressive country, and that's simply a byproduct. But understand that because of that, the women here have a different life perspective. Their formative year conclusions are different than the ones that you've likely come to. So understand that the women here, they need their independence. They need that freedom to move around, to operate. They are not your submissive, subservient sidekick. No, they are your equal. They're your partner. And if you don't come correct, if you don't treat them as such, rest assured that you'll be on a flight back home sooner rather than later.